I'm NIMA RAJAN, and this is Forum Daily Week in Review. Nova Scotia has come up with a new way to deal with the province's housing crisis. The provincial government announced last month that it would spend $1.3 million over 2 years to expand its partnership with an online home-sharing platform known as HappyPad. The platform brings together renters seeking affordable month-to-month accommodation with residents who have rooms to rent in their homes. The partnership was launched in the spring to help people displaced by wildfires, and it is now available to people across the province. Housing Minister John Lower said the partnership is a call to action to those who have extra space in their homes. Mr. Lower says that there are 130 vacant bedrooms across Nova Scotia, which could be used on a short-term basis by students, healthcare workers, tradespeople, and others who are looking for a safe, affordable, and comfortable place to live. Well, joining us now is the founder and CEO of HappyPad, Mr. Kaylin Libby. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Hello.
So quite the trajectory for your organization, sir. We mentioned this partnership with Nova Scotia began in the spring in response to wildfires, but how exactly did this announcement for the expansion of this partnership come about?
This has been an ongoing conversation for many months as the province of Nova Scotia has been looking for ways to help address the affordable housing crisis happening across the province. Our organization has been running programs across Canada since 2018, and we've demonstrated an impact to provide very affordable housing options by making better use of spare bedrooms that are otherwise sitting empty. And this has been launched as a pilot project in Nova Scotia to assess how we're able to make an impact on the affordable housing crisis.
And can you walk us through how this platform works? Is it easy to use?
Absolutely. The platform is designed to be user-friendly by people of all ages. Our oldest users have been well into their 90s, and people well into their early teens as well, like 18, 19 years old, first-time students. So we're designed for people of all ages. How the platform works is both sides create a matching profile, almost like a matchmaking service, where you can outline your expectations, some of your preferences, how you use your house, such as are you an early riser or a night owl? Do you like a very clean house? Or are you a little bit of a freestyle person, maybe a little bit disorganized? If you have certain allergies or food preferences, this can all be outlined there. And then renters are able to specify their budgets of what they can afford reasonably. And then hosts can specify what rooms they have available, how long they're available for. And then the two sides can find each other, they can match, and then they can sign a rental contract through the platform. And then homeowners get paid automatically through the process as well.
Sounds pretty straightforward. Now, one of the major issues facing renters in Nova Scotia, as you highlighted previously, is the issue of rising prices. So how does an app like HappyPad help to keep the costs of renting down?
Our approach to solving the affordable housing crisis is by creating more supply. And this supply comes in the form of spare bedrooms that are otherwise sitting empty. Across Nova Scotia, there's approximately 130,000 empty bedrooms that are sitting empty otherwise. So our approach is to provide a solution that makes it easy for homeowners to rent out this extra space by eliminating the typical fears and barriers they have about inviting someone in. So by doing so, we can reduce the barriers and ultimately allow the space to become available. We've seen in other regions of Canada that this approach to solving the housing supply challenge allows us to create very affordable rents. For example, in Metro Vancouver, one of the most expensive rental markets in the world, we've seen rentals through home sharing from $400 to around $800 per month, being somewhere from 30 to 80% below market rates.
It's quite the difference, sir. Just about a minute left here. But in terms of safety, how does HappyPad ensure the safety of both renters and those who are renting out their rooms in their homes?
We do comprehensive background checks on both parties by checking international databases for things like sex offender lists, criminal records, negative news, and identity verifications, and much, much more. And this is linked to everyone's account, so you can always review these reports before you ever make a decision.
And what have you been hearing from the users of HappyPad so far in terms of reviews?
Everyone's been ecstatic about it. We find that renters find it's much easier to find quality accommodations for a very fair price. And they also feel there's a lot less discrimination through the program opposed to traditional ways of renting. So especially for newcomers or international students, they found it's been a great way for them to find a great host home and a great way to transition to a new life in Canada.
All right, Mr. Libby, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Okay, thank you.
As the major parties in Ottawa debate the merits and specifics of a public inquiry into foreign interference, more evidence points to this being a major issue in Canada. Now, one of the latest stories, broken by Sam Cooper at the Bureau, highlights how CSIS documents show that influence from Beijing has made its way all the way to Canadian newsrooms. It finds that a representative from the Chinese government allegedly instructed journalists to support the rise of a particular federal candidate. Now, this report comes just weeks after a former RCMP officer was arrested for allegedly conspiring with the Chinese Communist Party to conduct foreign interference in Canada. Well, joining us now to discuss the latest report on foreign interference in the media is the journalist who broke the story, Mr. Sam Cooper, founder and first journalist at the Bureau. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me.
So, according to your reporting, it seems that the Chinese government has infiltrated Chinese language media in Canada. So, can you walk us through what exactly you've researched through your research and your report here?
What the documents that I reviewed say is that over the course of decades, the Chinese Communist Party has taken over many media outlets in Canada. This has scaled up most recently through President Xi Jinping's pouring of more resources into foreign interference. And the documents add that this control is enacted through Chinese consulates influencing and indeed controlling media associations in Canada to the point where many representatives, influential journalists get together and discuss exactly how an item will be reported and that it will be reported in a pro-Beijing manner. Furthermore, the documents directly connect this control of media in Canada to China's recent election interference operations. And these are operations, according to the documents, where media support is offered to candidates that Beijing would see as pro-Beijing. Ultimately, the documents say this is about China's efforts to control mainland China diaspora communities and leverage those communities politically in Canada.
Some very concerning information here, Mr. Cooper. But for some further background, what is the purpose for the Chinese government to infiltrate Chinese Canadian language media in the first place?
The range of documents I reviewed essentially say that the purpose here is Beijing simply wants to influence political outcomes in Canada. And this involves, as I've reported, not only clandestinely funding Beijing's candidates Beijing hopes will support its policies in federal government, but also using media entities in Canada to secretly support certain politicians. So the documents indicate that, again, media is used directly as an intervening tool in Canadian elections.
And it's not just Chinese language media we're talking about here. Your reporting also highlighted that the Chinese government has a strategy for manipulating mainstream media newsrooms. So what does that look like from your research?
That's right. The documents lay out an overarching systematic campaign where Beijing had previously been very defensive, of course, total domestic censorship on their media, also kicking out foreign language journalists that were seen as too critical of Beijing. Now Beijing has gone on the offensive, the Canadian documents say, infusing massive amounts of money to sway international giant media corporations into allegedly or hopefully in Beijing's view, publishing propaganda that is pro-Beijing. And also, the documents I reviewed said Canadian intelligence assesses Canadian media has been heavily targeted in these campaigns. I'll give you one example, a shocking example. A CSIS investigation uncovered in 2015, the Vancouver Chinese consulate allegedly unrolled a plan attempting to make some unidentified BC television stations pro-Beijing by cultivating relationships with key journalists, high-level managers, all in efforts to exert control over the media companies that they worked for. So serious allegations. And I'll tell you that I checked up on these allegations with Chinese language journalists that cannot be named, most of them, and they say these are totally plausible. And indeed, this is occurring in Canada.
Very concerning information. And Mr. Cooper, just a quick 30 seconds left here, but what are your thoughts on a foreign agent registry to address foreign interference in Canada?
Well, I talked to one of those journalists that was cited in an intelligence document. His name is Victor Ho, a former Vancouver newspaper editor. He testified Canada needs a foreign agent registry in 2020. He said this would compel pro-Beijing media to register. But as we know, the sitting government in Ottawa hasn't followed the recommendations of Mr. Ho or others, such as former Conservative MP Kenny Chiu. So I do believe Canada, like Australia, needs such a registration.
Over the past few years, cyber attacks targeting individuals, public entities, and companies have become more common in Canada. And the criminals behind these attacks are getting more creative. Just last week, news broke that cyber criminals were capitalizing on the hype around the Barbie movie. They did this by posting scam links or sending phishing emails claiming to offer tickets. And while Canadians are certainly aware that cyber attacks are more frequent, we're often left in the dark when it comes to some very important questions, which include who these criminals are attacking and why, what they're specifically looking for, and where these attacks are coming from. Well, joining us now is Timur Durrani, technology reporter with the Globe and Mail. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, obviously, there are some very high-profile cases where businesses have been targeted in Canada, but exactly how many businesses in Canada report either attempted or successful cyber attacks?
Well, data is out there. There's a lot of it. StatsCan actually hasn't been collecting as much since 2021. So the earliest that we have on a national basis from the government side is that 1 in 5 businesses, they took a poll of about 12,000 businesses of all different sizes, and they found 1 in 5 businesses were affected as of that year. Now, since that year, of course, MasterCard and a number of different other private firms have also found a lot of data, and they suggest that 1 in 3 is where we're at now. So at least 1 in 3 businesses have been affected. What's quite interesting about this is that not every business actually ends up reporting to the authorities. So all of these numbers are actually all based on whether they've actually in fact reported or not. And so a lot of businesses, for a number of different reasons, whether that's any stigma associated with a cyber crime, and they're worried about whether they're going to get that data back or not if they report, and for those different reasons they end up not actually letting the authorities know about it, and therefore we don't get to know about it either.
And what exactly are these hackers trying to achieve through these attacks? Is it just for financial gain, or is there something deeper behind the collection of personal data?
Yeah, so one of the things we learned a lot through our reporting was that, it's become diverse on a number of bases. And so one of the things that's happened is that hackers out there now have a lot of different reasons for why they attack businesses or companies, or, for example, the Prime Minister's office was also attacked as of April, right? And even the Senate of Canada's website was also attacked. So it's a lot of different types of organizations on the public side and private side that have been attacked for a number of different reasons, whether that's because of state-backed actors, say in Russia, because of Canada's involvement in the war on Ukraine from Russia and helping Ukraine out. So Russian attackers might be doing that for that reason. We've been warned of that actually by our intelligence agency here in Canada, that's going to happen a lot more. But then there's obviously all sorts of other reasons why, for something called hacktivists, we found out is really an interesting new thing that's happening where, companies are targeted based on these different activist groups wanting to review and embarrass their and things like that to make them public.
And looking at your reporting, it's really interesting that these hackers are a lot more organized and sophisticated than you might think. There's not just one singular hacker with a supercomputer targeting a large organization, but rather hacking businesses, people working 9 to 5, going on vacations. Can you tell us a little bit more about these hacking enterprises, what they look like, and where they primarily operate from?
Yeah, so when we started this reporting for the Globe, this started really all in February when we all heard of that big high-profile case with Indigo, which is, of course, Canada's largest bookstore chain, and so a very prominent retailer. Our reporting started around that, and we started asking ourselves a big picture question. we hear about these hacks over and over again. Why is it that they keep getting away with it? And that was the big question that we started to we approached it on a big picture. We started from Indigo, we found out whatever we could about it, and then we zoomed out of it from there. And so from there, we wanted to find out, what exactly these hackers look like. And so we talked to about over 36 people, close to about 40 people by the end almost. Even I, with some of them that we didn't include in the reporting, about 50 or so. So we talked to a lot of different people. Of course, we also talked to workers at Indigo who were impacted by this. And one of the things we learned, we created this sort of picture based on the different things that we now know for sure about these hackers. And that was that they're really kind of like any other small business or enterprise. They have shifts, they go on vacations, as you said, they do 9 to 5 sort of shifting, and they have accountants, they have financial experts. They make, as a whole, based on numbers that we've seen, again, it's really hard to verify these numbers for what this market actually looks like, because, criminals aren't exactly going to tell you how much money they're making. So what, the industry says that they've made is about US $1.5 trillion every year since at least last year, right? And so it's a lot of money being funneled into these crimes. And that's why they're very sophisticated. They have different organization levels, bosses, hotlines that have untraceable calls. Their clientele, extends beyond just one type of sort of enterprise. And they're very sophisticated in the way that they also aren't just exactly hacking enterprises in of themselves, but they're ransomware operations that lease out their software to other people to also do hacking of their own.
Recent reporting by the Globe and Mail, dubbed Secret Canada, highlights major concerns among Canadian businesses regarding Canada's information, or rather access to information system. After auditing 250 public entities, the Globe found that a vast majority of them were not meeting their legal obligations to properly disclose information. Now, one growing problem is the failure to disclose information related to government contracts. This is under a clause in the Access to Information Act called Section 20. In response to this trend, business groups have begun to voice their concerns, and taxpayer organizations like the Canadian Taxpayers Federation have joined them. Well, joining us now to discuss the issue of government contracts and access to information requests is Mr. Chris Hannay, independent business reporter for the Globe and Mail. Mr. Hannay, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we really dive into this for our viewers, can you explain how an access to information request works?
For sure. So access to information is often called freedom of information. And pretty much every level of government, city, province, federal government, and a lot of public institutions like the police or universities have different forms of access to information or freedom of information systems. And the basic way it works is that, because these are public institutions, they're funded by taxpayer dollars, they have a responsibility to be open and transparent with Canadians about how that money is used. And so if somebody wants to file a request, the procedures can differ a little bit depending on who you're filing it to. Usually there's a small fee, and you just kind of write out, hey, I would like this document. And you can request anything that that institution has. So it could be emails between bureaucrats. It could be government contracts. It could be reports that have been prepared. Any kind of document that exists somewhere on a government server, you should have access to.
And your reporting has cited that in many instances, information is redacted because of something called Section 20 under the Access to Information Act. So can you tell us a little bit more about Section 20?
Sure. So what I was writing about the federal access to information system. So the federal law contains a bunch of sections that lay out reasons that the government can withhold information from you. And so these reasons can vary from, because it's the personal information of a citizen to, national security issues. And so I recently wrote highlighting Section 20 of the Act, which covers something called third-party information, which is information about companies that is held by the government. In particular, this was in the context of contracts. So this could be maybe a government put out a bid, put out a tender for companies to bid on a government contract, or maybe the government just awarded contracts to people. And, if you're somebody like me, a reporter, or you're just a citizen or working for another organization or business, and you want to learn more about that contract, often you'll find that the information is withheld under something called, under this Section 20 third-party information.
And in your discussions with legal experts, is there a justification for redacting the information within a government contract?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much so. This is one of those things where the principle of it, like the principle of access to information in general, is that things should be open and transparent. What happens here is that if you file a request for a contract, if the government then goes to the company that won that contract and says, "Hey, do you think that we should disclose all of this, or do you think that we should withhold some of this?" And sometimes a company will just say, "Yeah, just release it all." But oftentimes, what will happen is that the company will say, "You know what? Just withhold it for us," and so the government will withhold it and not release that information. So, this tech. Oftentimes, this is, I guess, legal, but when this has come up in court, as it does occasionally, often judges have ruled that the principle here is that things should be transparent and things should only be withheld if it's really important information, like really commercial secrets, that a company has a legitimate reason to want to withhold.
All right, Mr. Haney, just a quick 30 seconds left here. But from your perspective, how do you see this potentially impacting the public's ability to hold government spending to account?
Well, it makes it really challenging. And recently the House of Commons committee, released a report with recommendations to change the access to information law. And one of the things they said is that one of the recommendations they had is that this information on public spending should always be transparent, and the government should actually amend the law to make that very clear.
All right, Mr. Haney, thank you again for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm NIMA RAJAN, and that'll do it for your look at important conversations from this past week. Thanks again for joining us today on Forum Daily Week in Review, and we'll see you next time. Take care, Canada.